You might never look at cruise vacations the same way after hearing this. The only station that brings you real horror stories that have been investigated, confirmed, and documented is Eerie Hour. Welcome back. Tonight, as your host, I'm taking you into the darkest corners of the American cruise industry. From ports like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and New York, more than 15 million Americans step onto cruise ships every year, trusting their lives to these giant, floating cities. They expect fun, luxury, and safety. But what some of them face out at sea is something most of us can't even imagine. Some never return home. They face dangers we hope we never see. What you are about to hear are 9 true stories confirmed by U.S. Coast Guard reports, cruise line incident files, and first-hand accounts from experts who served aboard U.S. ships. These aren't creepypastas from Reddit. They aren't rumors told at ship bars. These are real cases involving real American passengers. Even worse, some of the criminals and mysteries you'll hear about are still out there. The following accounts have been verified and cross-checked with Coast Guard records and U.S. maritime paperwork. So before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe, ring the notification bell, and be ready for the most chilling, true stories at sea. Click like if these tales send shivers down your spine. Music. Story 1. Our first story will make you question everything you thought you knew about cruise ship safety. The first case centers on a man named James Mark, a veteran security guard who saw something during a voyage from Miami to Nassau that no authority has been able to explain to this day. James was not new to danger. He was a 34-year-old former Navy petty officer with 8 years of security experience on Royal Caribbean's Independence. He was well respected for being calm, sharp, and serious about his job. He knew the ship inside and out. The Independence carried more than 3,200 passengers on its Miami to Nassau runs, and James had practically made the massive ship his second home. He had memorized every hallway, every safety procedure, every threat that could happen, but nothing he had learned in his Navy years or cruise security training could prepare him for October 15, 2019. That night was calm, one of those perfect Caribbean evenings when the sea is smooth, the air is still, and passengers are quietly enjoying their dreams. James had just begun his regular night patrol at around 2 o'clock a.m. This was his favorite shift. Less drunk guests to worry about, calmer decks, and the peaceful feeling of protecting families while they slept. His routine was always the same. Start on deck 6 and make his way up to deck 10, inspecting each corridor for anything unusual. His gear was simple: a flashlight, his master key card, and his security radio. Though the ship was dim at night to keep guests comfortable, the Independence was equipped with advanced security cameras, many of which James himself had helped install during renovations 2 years earlier. At exactly 2:47 a.m., as he walked the starboard side of Deck 8, something caught his attention. The door of cabin 8047 was slightly open. That alone was strange. Families almost never left their doors unlocked at night. Following procedure, James quietly approached. In a polite, professional tone, he tapped the frame and said, "Security here. Just noticed your cabin door is open. I need to check everything is okay." He waited, counting to 10. Silence. He knocked again, louder. "Security inspection. Just checking on your safety." Still no reply. Following safety rules, James swiped his MasterCard and opened the door. What he saw froze him. The cabin was completely empty, not just of people. There were no belongings at all, no lugs. Gauge, no clothes, no toiletries in the bathroom. The beds were made perfectly, like no one had ever touched them. But according to his manifest, this room was booked. The Morrison family, David and Sarah, both 38, and their kids, Michael 9 and Emma 12, were listed as current passengers. They had checked in less than a day earlier. Confused, James immediately called it in. "Control, this is Mark. Cabin 8247 is totally empty, but the manifest shows a family in here." His boss, Lieutenant Rodriguez, answered at once. "That can't be right, Mark. They were seen yesterday. Records show they used their key card at 11:43 p.m. They were inside that room." James searched every corner, under beds, the balcony, the closets, even the bathroom. Nothing. No sign anyone had ever stayed there. No hair, no fingerprints, no smudges. It was like the family had been erased. Minutes later, Rodriguez and Patricia Wells, the night manager, joined him. Patricia pulled up digital logs showing the Morrisons had ordered room service at 10:30 p.m., gone to dinner, and bought drinks by the pool. But when she looked at the room service record, her face went pale. The food had been signed out by crew member number 000000, an ID that didn't exist. Rodriguez quickly ordered the camera footage. In the security office, they rolled back to when the ship left Miami. At 11:43 p.m., the Morrison family was clearly seen walking down Deck 8. David with his backpack, Sarah holding Emma's hand, Michael running ahead. They opened their cabin door, entered, and closed it behind them. They never came out, but here was the impossible part. When James had checked at 2:47 a.m., the room was empty. Even worse, when the footage rolled forward to 3:33 a.m., just 14 minutes after James's check, the same family appeared again on the cameras. Same clothes, same movements, same backpack. Michael still running ahead. They entered the same cabin, 247, again. James shook his head. That's impossible. I was right there at that time. No one was in that hallway. Patricia cross-checked the logs. At 3:33 a.m., the keycard was swiped again. Then Rodriguez pulled up more feeds. What they saw was horrifying. At 3:33 a.m., the Morrison family showed up on 5 different cameras in 5 different places on the ship, entering their cabin, riding the elevators, in the dining room, near the pool deck, at the gift shop, all at the same exact time, same family, same clothes, same timestamp. James, with his Navy training and 8 years of security, was watching something that broke every rule of reality he knew. Captain Harrison was called. He arrived quickly, watched the footage, and gave one order. This video stays in this room. No one outside sees it. An investigation followed. The Coast Guard was notified, but the official log claimed the Morrison family had left early due to a private emergency. A helicopter crew came the next morning, sealed the cabin, and inspected it. James was told government agents were involved, though he never saw their IDs. 3 days later, James was removed from duty, given a severance package, pension, and forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He was warned never to speak of the incident to anyone. But the damage was done. James never slept the same again. Every night, he found himself awake at 3:33 a.m. He began researching other cases, families who vanished on cruises, strange security videos, crew who spoke of impossible sightings before being silenced. He now lives quietly in North Carolina, working security jobs on land. He avoids ships at all costs. Yet sometimes, late at night, he checks cruise passenger lists online, searching for the Morrisons, wondering if they're still out there, repeating their endless walk through cabins and decks. The Royal Caribbean Independence still sails from Miami to Nassau. Cabin 8247 can still be booked, though housekeeping claim it requires cleaning more often than any other room. Guests say they sometimes hear children's footsteps racing through the hall at exactly 3:33 a.m., even though the cameras show no one there. On October 20th, 2019, James's security clearance was permanently revoked. The Morrison case remains officially closed. But deep in restricted maritime files, investigators who know the truth admit it's one of the most haunting disappearances at sea. Somewhere between Miami and Nassau, the Morrison family still lingers. Let's move to our second tale. This one will make you rethink everything about the food you eat on board. In this story, a head chef on the Norwegian Getaway witnesses something that ends her career forever. Her name was Isabella Santos. At just 29, she had worked her way up to become executive chef after 6 years in grueling cruise ship kitchens. On this 7-day Caribbean voyage from Miami, she managed the preparation of more than 15,000 meals every day for both passengers and crew. Known for her strict discipline and spotless kitchens, Isabella never once received a health code violation. She took pride in her system, where every surface gleamed, every ingredient was tracked, and every procedure was logged. The Norwegian Getaway was a giant of a ship, with 600 crew and 4,000 passengers. The main galley on Deck 2 was her command center, equipped with 12 cooking stations, industrial fridges, and endless storage. It ran like a military base. Cold, precise, efficient. But on March 8, 2021, her perfect system would be shaken. Isabella arrived at 4:30 a.m. to inspect the overnight prep, hours before breakfast service. The night crew had prepared the basics: eggs, fruits, pastries, bacon, all ready for the thousands of guests who would soon pour into the Windjammer Cafe. Isabella checked every detail as usual: fridge temperatures, surface sanitation, logbooks signed by her night supervisor, Carlos Martinez. Everything looked perfect, no mistakes. Still, Isabella trusted her instincts, using her thermometer to test food items herself. At 5:15 a.m., her breakfast crew filed in. Miguel at the egg station, Elena with the fruit displays, Antonio firing up ovens for bacon and pastries. The kitchen buzzed with smooth routine. But soon, Isabella would see something in that galley that would make her question every belief she had about food safety on the open sea. Isabella watched through the galley windows as families began piling their plates with the breakfast her team had prepared when the Windjammer Cafe opened at 6:45 a.m. She felt that usual pride seeing passengers enjoy safe, freshly made meals she had overseen herself. Everything seemed normal until 8:23 a.m., when she received a call that would change her life forever. Chef Santos, this is Patricia Williams from the medical center. One of our passengers is showing serious signs of food sickness. She's asking about your breakfast service. Isabella's chest tightened. Every cruise chef's greatest fear was food poisoning, but she trusted her system. Still, she quickly reviewed everything in her head about that morning's prep. By 8:45 a.m., 3 more passengers with the same violent symptoms had arrived at the infirmary: dizziness, vomiting, nausea. By 9:30 a.m., the number had jumped to 12. By 10:15 a.m., over 50 people were sick, and Dr. Williams admitted, "I've never seen symptoms like this in 15 years of cruise medicine." Isabella immediately ordered breakfast service shut down and began working with Dr. Williams to find the source. Every food item from that morning, eggs, bacon, fruit, pastries, even the drinking water, was collected and rushed to the ship's onboard lab for testing. Isabella combed through the kitchen surveillance recordings, desperate to find any mistake. But when the test results came back at 2:00 p.m., they made no sense. No bacteria, no viruses, no toxins. The water was clean. Storage temperatures had been perfect, yet more thighs. And 200 passengers were sick with identical symptoms, and there was no scientific explanation. Dr. Williams shook her head in disbelief. "I've tested everything twice, Isabella. Your food is spotless, and yet all of them ate your breakfast. Something is happening here that doesn't exist in medical records. Some are even describing visions of being underwater, and others are speaking languages they never knew." That night, Isabella replayed the galley surveillance footage with trembling hands. The kitchen was covered by 8 high-definition cameras, and she had reviewed these tapes countless times before. But now, she searched for the smallest anomaly, and she saw them. At 3:47 a.m., 43 minutes before her daily inspection, strangers walked through her kitchen. They weren't part of her crew. Their IDs were not in the ship's system. Isabella knew every face allowed in that galley, and these were not her people. They moved with disturbing precision, touching prep surfaces, handling tools, and working as if they belonged there. Their features were blurred by what looked like burns or twisted deformities, but they wore kitchen uniforms. They worked like dancers in a grim routine, moving in unison, using tools and ingredients that didn't appear on camera at all. It was as if they were preparing something invisible. Isabella's stomach sank as she realized they had been there for exactly 17 minutes, disappearing at 4:04 a.m., just 26 minutes before she herself arrived. The footage was clear, the timestamp was undeniable, and yet security logs showed only her authorized staff entering or leaving the kitchen. Panicked, she called Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the ship's head of security. Within minutes, he was staring at the footage with a face drained of color. "This isn't possible, Chef. My men guard these halls all night. No unauthorized person entered here." He pulled up surveillance from the hallways outside the galley. Multiple cameras showed only Isabella's night staff moving through the area. But the kitchen cameras did not lie. Those strangers had been there, and they had touched the food. The investigation was swift and devastating for Isabella. Captain Erik Johansson called both the Coast Guard and Norwegian Cruise Line headquarters. By the afternoon, a team of investigators arrived by helicopter. They carried credentials from Maritime Security and even the CDC, though Isabella was never allowed to confirm who they really were. They interrogated her for hours, focusing not on the footage but on her protocols, her mental state, her security clearance. They seized all surveillance tapes, locked down the galley for 3 days, and conducted what they called special testing. In the meantime, Isabella was quietly reassigned to oversee the crew dining area. On the 4th day, she was summoned to a private meeting with Captain Johansson, the lead investigator, and a company lawyer. It was brief and crushing. Our inquiry concludes there was a failure in food safety during breakfast service on March 8th, they told her. As executive chef, you are responsible, even though we cannot trace the exact source of contamination. Isabella fought back with her spotless logs and procedures, but the investigators' cold response silenced her. The video you think you saw of unknown individuals, Chef Santos, has been analyzed. It contains corrupted data. It cannot be considered evidence. What you believe you witnessed was a glitch. The next morning, she was offered a settlement, a severance package, glowing references, and 6 months' pay if she signed a non-disclosure agreement. She was forbidden from ever discussing March 8th, not with the media, not with food safety regulators, not with other chefs. Norwegian promised not to contest any unemployment claims. Trembling, Isabella signed. Her career at sea was over. Back home, in San Antonio, Isabella tried to restart her life. She opened a small cafe, but the shadows followed her. Every morning, she checked her own security cameras before opening. Every night, she double-checked temperatures and ingredients. She still woke choking, as if drowning, the same terror passengers had described. She spent hours digging through news reports of unexplained cruise ship food outbreaks, other chefs who vanished from the industry after quiet settlements, other cases of illnesses with no cause. She noticed a disturbing pattern. Each case linked to ships where surveillance footage had been mysteriously corrupted. Meanwhile, the Norwegian Getaway continued to sail. Its galley was remodeled, outfitted with new cameras and new staff. Passengers still enjoy the Windjammer's breakfast buffet, never knowing the kitchen once held a mystery officials call equipment failure. But Isabella knows better. At 3:47 a.m., she can still see them in her mind, those burned, faceless figures drifting through the galley, working in silence on food that should never have reached human hands. Isabella Santos still checks her watch, always remembering the moment when her life turned upside down. She had never stepped foot on a cruise ship before that day. Even now, in her small cafe kitchen late at night, she sometimes rewinds the old CCTV tape to be sure she is really alone. Now let's move on to the third story, one that will truly make your skin crawl. Story 3. This one takes us deep inside the Carnival Vista's engine room, where a chief engineer faced something no manual or machine could explain. After working in engine rooms for 15 years, James Mallister had one encounter that forced him to give up the sea forever. At just 42 years old, James carried the heavy responsibility of keeping the Carnival Vista alive. Huge diesel engines, humming generators, and endless systems that powered one of Carnival Cruise Line's grandest ships. With 1,400 crew and over 4,000 guests aboard, the heart of it all was James's engine room. He came from a family of ship mechanics, his father and grandfather before him, and earned his place as a third-generation engineer. Trained at the United States Merchant Marine Academy, James was respected for solving any problem the ocean could throw at him. The Carnival Vista itself was a floating masterpiece of technology. Launched in 2016, it came equipped with advanced propulsion systems and electronics designed to catch problems before disaster. The ship's giant Wärtsilä diesel engines sat buried in the lowest decks, generating over 62,000 horsepower to push the 133, 500-ton giant across the Mediterranean. Hidden far below where passengers laughed and drank above, James knew every pipe, valve, and gauge like the back of his hand. But on September 14, 2020, while the ship was sailing smoothly from Barcelona to Naples, James learned that not every danger could be explained by mechanics. It was 11:30 p.m. when he made his final inspection before the night crew took over. The sea outside was calm, the engines were running perfectly, fuel steady, and power flowing as it should. He walked the familiar route, past the deafening diesel chambers, through the generator rooms, and finally to the auxiliary machinery where pumps and compressors throbbed in rhythm. That was when he noticed it, something small but wrong. A pump on the seawater intake system was running when it should have been in standby. Routine, he thought, just a simple adjustment. He walked over, bent down to check the panel, and that's when it happened. The sound was sharp and terrifying, the groan of metal straining under impossible weight. Before he could even react, a section of overhead piping tore loose and came crashing down. James leapt to avoid it, but the massive steel caught him, crushing his left leg against the pump. The pain was instant and unbearable, his leg snapping in multiple places. Worse than the pain was The realization no one would be back for nearly 45 minutes. His radio crackled but couldn't break through the heavy metal now caging him in. He heard voices faintly, but nothing reached. James was trapped in the dark belly of the ship, with tons of steel pinning him down. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. His vision blurred with pain, his mind drifting, but the figure was real. A man stood in the shadows near the water treatment unit, half lit by the emergency lights. Relief shot through James. Thank God, someone was here. He shouted, his voice shaking, begging the figure to call for help. But the man didn't move like he should have. He drifted forward strangely, his boots not fully touching the grated floor. James's breath caught as the face came into view. It wasn't just anyone. It was Thomas Bradley, the former chief engineer, the same man who had died of a heart attack in that very engine room just 3 years earlier. James had carried Bradley's belongings out himself, spoken at his memorial, even stood at his grave. Yet here he was, looking alive, dressed in his old carnival coveralls, calm as ever. James whispered his name, wondering if pain and shock were warping his mind. But the moment Bradley spoke, James knew it was no hallucination. His voice was hollow, like it echoed from inside metal walls. "James, you're stuck here for a while. Your leg is broken in 3 places. You'll go into shock soon, but don't worry. I'll stay with you." The hours stretched like years. Bradley sat casually on a nearby unit, talking to James as though they were still working side by side. He spoke of systems, maintenance routines, even the ship's newest upgrades, things he should not have known, not after death. He told James he was burning himself out, taking on too much, just like he had. His words cut deeper than the pain, because they were true. James drifted in and out of consciousness, but Bradley never left, keeping him in the shadows of the engine room where he had once fallen dead. Finally, at 3:15 a.m., relief came. Night shift engineer Roberto Silva walked in for his usual round, flashlight sweeping the room. He froze at the sight, James pinned beneath twisted pipes, pale and barely breathing. But by then, Thomas Bradley was gone. Only the silence of the engine room remained, leaving James to wonder if he had seen a ghost, or something much worse. As Bradley had warned, it took cutting torches and heavy tools to free James from the twisted pipes. The rescue dragged on for 40 minutes while a medical team worked to keep him alive until they could move him. Through the pain, James kept searching the shadows of the room, hoping to see Thomas Bradley again. But the old engineer was gone. The rescue crew later said they overheard James speaking to someone in the machinery room before they reached him. When Roberto asked who James had been talking to, James had no answer he could bring himself to give. Hours later, surgeons in Palma, Mallorca spent 8 long hours repairing the multiple fractures in his left leg. While he lay in recovery, investigators swarmed. Insurance adjusters, maritime safety officers, and Carnival's own accident team grilled him endlessly. They decided metal fatigue in the brackets had caused the pipe collapse, something that should have been caught long before. But James knew differently. He had checked those same fittings dozens of times, even 6 hours before the accident. They had been flawless. The kind of metalware they described would take years, not hours, to appear. What James couldn't explain away was Bradley. The ghost had known things no hallucination could know. He mentioned engineers who joined the ship years after his death. He spoke of modifications done recently in the Vista's systems. He even predicted almost to the minute when James would be found. These details gnawed at James, convincing him that Bradley had been real. 6 weeks later, when Carnival pushed him back onto the Vista for a return-to-duty check, James lasted only 4 hours before begging to leave. Every step into the auxiliary machinery room filled him with dread. The sense of being watched never left him. Crew whispered of strange happenings, gauges flickering with readings that made no sense, tools sliding from where they were left, and footsteps in empty halls. James finally accepted Carnival's early retirement package, signing a thick non-disclosure agreement that bought his silence. The official report claimed nothing but poor inspection practices and recommended better safety checks, but nothing in writing mentioned Thomas Bradley. Back home in Mobile, Alabama, James turned down every cruise ship offer that came his way. He worked instead as a consultant for smaller maritime companies, far from floating cities of steel. Yet the nightmares persisted. Always the same, him pinned under the pipe, and Bradley sitting beside him in the dim light, watching with eyes full of grim knowledge. Meanwhile, the Carnival Vista sails on, its engine room rebuilt with stronger pipes, new safety systems, and upgraded radios. But still, Crew speak of unease. Some ask for transfers after working shifts where they feel eyes on them or hear whispers in the dark. James, now off the sea, still reads every maritime accident report he can find. He notices a troubling pattern: mysterious breakdowns, sudden resignations, and engineers silenced by contracts. At night, his phone sometimes rings with no one speaking on the other end, only the low thrum of engines far away. James always hangs up quickly, but deep down, he knows Bradley has never left the engine rooms. Let's go on to the fourth tale, and this one will truly unsettle you because it shows what happens when medicine itself turns strange. The ship's hospital, normally a place of healing, became a stage for something terrifying. It happened aboard the Celebrity Eclipse when a doctor witnessed patients showing signs no medical book could explain. Dr. Lisa had been at sea for 7 years, one of Celebrity's most experienced physicians, at only 31. On a 14-day trip through Northern Europe, she was responsible for the health of nearly 3,000 passengers and more than 1,000 crew. Her medical center was a state-of-the-art facility, stocked with modern machines, medicine, and even a small surgical suite. Trained at Johns Hopkins with years in emergency medicine, she thought she had seen everything, but the ocean had other plans. The Eclipse was sleek and modern, carrying guests through icy waters and quiet fjords. Dr. Lisa's clinic sat tucked into Deck 1, out of sight but close enough for emergencies. It held exam rooms, a dozen beds, labs, and high-end diagnostic tools. She thought she was ready for anything. But on June 22, 2019, as the ship cut across the North Sea, she faced something no training could prepare her for. It began at exactly 3:33 a.m. Her nurse, Patricia Morrison, called in a panic from the night shift. "Doctor, you need to come now. I don't know what I'm looking at." Dr. Lisa rushed to the clinic expecting a stroke or cardiac arrest. Instead, she found Sandra, a 58-year-old retired teacher from Manchester, sitting calmly on the exam table, speaking fluent Norwegian. That alone would have been strange, but Sandra's records showed she only spoke English and had never been to Norway. Dr. Lisa approached gently, asking how she felt. Sandra turned glassy eyes toward her and answered in quick, perfect Norwegian. Patricia pulled Lisa aside, whispering with shaking hands. She came in speaking English, complaining of nausea and dizziness. Then she just switched. She hasn't spoken a word of English since. And doctor, she's describing Ergen Harbor, dock numbers, ship schedules, things she cannot possibly know. Dr. Lisa began her exam, checking vitals, reflexes, blood pressure, all normal. Sandra looked healthy, except for the impossible language pouring from her lips, growing faster, more detailed, more unsettling. Then, at 3:47 a.m., another patient arrived. Michelle, 34, from Dallas. She stumbled in with nausea, then began speaking Danish she had never studied, describing the seabed of the North Sea as though she had seen it herself. By 4:15, there were 6 patients in the infirmary, different ages, different backgrounds, strangers to one another, but all showing the same horrifying symptoms. Each spoke in languages they had never learned, each describing shipwrecks, drowned sailors, and underwater landscapes with chilling detail. Anthony, a 45-year-old Boston man, was the worst of all. His words, later identified as an archaic form of Norwegian unused for 2 centuries, recounted the sinking of warships, complete with names, dates, and coordinates. He spoke of cargo manifests no living person could have memorized. Dr. Lisa ran every test she had, blood work, scans, neurological exams. Every result came back normal. These people should have been healthy, yet their sickness deepened. They began describing the feeling of being submerged, surrounded by dead sailors, choking on seawater that wasn't there. At times, they moved together in eerie unison, turning their heads at the same instant, staring at things no one else could see, whispering about the same dark places beneath the sea. Dr. Lisa stood frozen in the middle of it all, realizing she was facing something no science could explain. And in that moment, she made a choice that would end her career at sea. At 5:30 a.m., Dr. Lisa called Captain Robert Morrison and demanded that all 6 patients be evacuated by helicopter right away. "Captain, 6 of my passengers are showing symptoms I cannot explain or treat with the equipment we have on board. They need advanced neurological tests and psychiatric evaluations immediately." Within minutes, Captain Morrison arrived at the medical center, his face pale with shock at what he saw. The 6 patients sat in eerie unison, their heads tilted at the exact same angle, muttering in old, dead languages, yet clearly responding to the same unseen voices. As the captain stepped inside, every one of them turned toward him in perfect synchronization. Their voices blended into a single chorus, each speaking in their own strange tongue, but all saying the same exact words. "Welcome aboard, Captain," translated Dr. Lisa's Norwegian colleague. "We have been waiting for you in the deep waters." Captain Morrison's face tightened with fear. Without hesitation, he ordered the ship to change course toward the nearest port with helicopter evacuation capability. Dawn was scheduled for the evacuation, but it would take nearly 3 hours to reach the rendezvous point. During that time, the patient's behavior grew more disturbing, tearing apart everything Dr. Lisa thought she knew about human consciousness. They began sketching identical maps of the ocean floor on whatever paper they could find, their hands moving in perfect rhythm. Each drawing marked precise shipwreck locations with chilling accuracy, details only found in marine archives and historical records. Some maps even showed the final moments of maritime disasters with such clarity it was as if they had been there themselves, watching the ships sink. What shook Dr. Lisa most was how the patients seemed to share one mind. Even though they spoke in different languages, they finished each other's sentences flawlessly, as though a single voice had been scattered across 6 bodies. When the helicopter team finally arrived, Dr. Lisa noticed the specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists, yet none were people C. He recognized, nor were their credentials shared. They sedated the patients quickly, taking them away without a single explanation. Before leaving, Dr. Lisa was ordered to keep all medical records confidential until an official investigation could be conducted. The investigation came swiftly and with unnerving precision. Dr. Lisa was questioned not only by the medical director of Celebrity Cruises but also by marine safety officials and supposed representatives of international health organizations. They grilled her endlessly on her mental stability, her diagnostic methods, and her interpretations of the patient's strange symptoms. By the 3rd day, an official diagnosis was declared: acute stress-induced psychosis with xenoglossia-like features. A condition Dr. Lisa had never once encountered in any medical textbook. The experts insisted the languages were not real fluency, but instead confabulation, complex delusions created by the mind under stress. They called it a shared psychotic break caused by the strange isolation of the nautical environment. Dr. Lisa argued fiercely, showing her detailed notes, the recorded histories, the impossible precision of the patient's knowledge, and their synchronized reactions, but her protests were silenced with a chilling response. "Dr. Lisa," said the lead investigator coldly, "our findings suggest that treating multiple psychiatric cases at once caused you to develop contamination bias. You began hearing meaning where there was none." It was the end of her career at sea. In exchange for signing a strict non-disclosure agreement, Celebrity Cruises offered her a generous payout, a transfer to a land-based medical role, and full benefits. She would never be allowed to speak of June 22nd again, not to maritime authorities, not to researchers, not even to fellow doctors. Reluctant but cornered, Dr. Lisa took the offer. She now works at an urgent care clinic in Seattle, but her nights are restless. In secret, she continues to study xenoglossia, maritime psychs, hology, and strange cases of group hysteria. What she finds unsettles her more with each passing year. Reports of passengers suddenly speaking languages they never learned, clusters of cruise guests displaying synchronized psychiatric symptoms, and shared visions of undersea places no living human has ever seen. With each discovery, her sense of dread deepens. The Celebrity Eclipse still sails northern Europe with a new medical officer. Its medical facility has been upgraded with new psychiatric medications and improved communication systems for handling psychological emergencies. Yet, despite these changes, crew members quietly report new cases, patients suddenly speaking in tongues, uttering nautical jargon that hasn't been used in centuries. Norwegian translators on board have even been quietly trained in archaic sea terms, just in case. Dr. Lisa keeps reading, searching, desperate to find other doctors who have witnessed the same things she did. Sometimes, late at night, she pores over archives of shipwrecks in the North Sea, looking for patterns, trying to convince herself she hasn't lost her mind. But she can never shake the question that haunts her. What if Sandra, Michelle, and Anthony are still out there, trapped somewhere beneath the waves, still describing undersea landscapes that medicine will never reach. Now let's go on to our fifth narrative, which will make you want to stay in your cabin forever. We reach the MSC Seaside on our fifth level, where an entire deck of passengers vanished for 4 hours. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can explain what the cruise director found during those missing hours. After 20 years as a cruise director, Captain Robert Anderson came across something that made him question reality itself. One of the most experienced entertainment planners in the U.S. cruise industry, he was 48 years old and responsible for guest activity. East aboard the MSC Seaside during its 7-day Eastern Caribbean journey from Miami. The Seaside was one of MSC's pride ships, carrying 413 crew and over 4,100 passengers. Robert's job was to make sure everyone got the vacation they had paid for. Before he rose through the ranks, Robert began as a junior entertainment coordinator on small ships, working his way up. He studied hotel management at Florida International University and was certified in crisis management, crowd control, and passenger safety. Colleagues trusted him to handle anything: seasick guests, massive events, or the chaos of entertaining thousands over long days at sea. The MSC Seaside itself was a marvel, with its outdoor promenade circling Deck 8, giving passengers panoramic ocean views and open-air dining. From the Grand Theater on Deck 6 to the sports area on Deck 16, Robert's office on Deck 5 placed him perfectly between it all, with easy access to any passenger space. The design was flawless, built to prevent crowding and keep guests moving smoothly. But on the night of August 3, 2021, Robert encountered something no training could prepare him for. It began at 9:47 p.m. during the ship's evening show. His assistant planner, Maria Santos, called in, a voice filled with confusion. "Robert, I'm getting strange reports from Deck 7. The sports bar, the casino, the karaoke lounge, they're all saying the same thing. Their rooms are completely empty, but the passenger tracking system says over 200 people should be in those venues right now." Robert immediately checked his management tablet, which displayed events in real time and tracked attendance. Sure enough, it showed 247 passengers currently active in Deck 7's scheduled activities. The casino should have been packed with a poker tournament. McBride's bar should have been alive with trivia night. The Star Lounge should have been echoing with karaoke, but Maria's report said otherwise. "Maria, double-check the locations yourself and report back," Robert ordered, his own unease rising. But even as he said it, he was already on his way to Deck 7 to see the truth for himself. In his 20 years of running entertainment on cruise ships, Robert had never faced a situation where hundreds of guests suddenly and mysteriously vanished from events. Yet when he arrived on Deck 7, he saw exactly what Maria had reported. Every entertainment space was completely empty. The Star Lounge, with its 80 seats and karaoke stage set up with microphones and song lists, was abandoned. The casino poker tables were laid out with chips and cards, but no players. McBride's bar had tables prepared for trivia night with pencils and answer sheets, but only staff stood there, looking just as confused as Robert. "Where is everyone?" Robert asked Jennifer Walsh, the karaoke lounge manager. "Your reservations say 78 people signed up tonight." Jennifer looked down at her tablet, bewildered. "That's what makes this so strange, Mr. Anderson. At 9:30, the room was full. People were drinking, laughing, singing. I stepped into the back room at 9:47 to grab more music forms, and when I came back, everyone was gone, just gone. Drinks were still full, some were still warm, phones, coats, purses, all left behind. They vanished in seconds." Robert scanned the lounge. She was right. Half-drunk cocktails, untouched plates of food, and belongings littered the tables as though time had frozen mid-scene. Every venue on Deck 7 showed the same eerie signs. In the casino, ashtrays still smoked, poker chips were stacked mid-game, and cards lay face-up in hands that were no longer there. David Kim, the casino supervisor, showed Robert the computer records. "Look here, Mr. Anderson. Play was logged right up until 9:47 p.m. sharp. Then every player just dropped out at the exact same second, but their cash, their drinks, their personal things, still sitting right here." Robert dug into the passenger tracking system, which logged movements. With keycard swipes, it confirmed that all 247 missing passengers had entered Deck 7 venues between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. But no record showed them leaving. Robert stared at the impossible data. This makes no sense. The system says they're still here, but clearly they're not. Run a manifest check, call guest services, and ping all their cards. 15 minutes later, the results only deepened the nightmare. Every one of the missing guests pinged as present, in their cabins, at the exact same time. It should have been impossible, but the computer even showed some passengers logged in multiple places at once, in their cabins, in the dining room, at the pool deck, in the spa. Lisa Thompson from Guest Services called with another disturbing update. Mr. Anderson, I've been phoning the missing passengers' cabins. They're answering. They sound perfectly normal. They all insist they've been in their rooms all night. But the logs show them in Deck 7 venues, and their dinner reservations show they ate out just 2 hours ago. Desperate for clarity, Robert decided to check in person. He started with the Mitchell family, David and Sarah with their 2 teenagers who had signed up for karaoke. Their cabin number was 8247. When Robert knocked, David Mitchell answered with a warm smile. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson. Is something wrong? We've been here in the cabin all night watching movies." Inside, Sarah and the kids sat calmly on the couch, still wearing the exact clothes they had worn to dinner earlier. Their appearance was flawless, but their eyes looked oddly distant, unfocused. Robert held out his tablet. "According to the records, your family was scanned into the Star Lounge at 9:15 tonight. You were supposed to be at karaoke." David frowned, glancing at the television. "That's strange. We've been here all evening, haven't left." His voice, though, didn't sound quite right. It carried a hollow, faraway echo, as if it wasn't really coming from him. Robert left with a chill crawling up his spine. He found the same pattern in other cabins, families and solo passengers insisting they'd been in their rooms, but their keycards and the cameras told another story. Each voice had that same strange filtered tone, and each set of eyes shared that same glassy, unfocused stare. At 1:33 a.m., 4 hours after the vanishings, Robert's phone rang. It was Lieutenant Rodriguez from security. "Mr. Anderson, you'd better come to Deck 7 right now." Rushing back, Robert froze at the sight. All 247 missing passengers were there again, singing in karaoke, shuffling poker chips, answering trivia questions, exactly where they had been at 9:47, dressed the same, doing the same things, as if nothing had ever happened. Their drinks were fresh, their food hot, and not one of them acted as though any time had passed. Robert spotted the Mitchells. "David, I just saw you in your cabin an hour ago." David looked at him with bright, focused eyes, nothing like before. "You must be mistaken, Mr. Anderson. We've been here at karaoke all night. The kids are about to sing, and Sarah just finished her song. We've been here since 9:15. Robert was never allowed to see the full credentials of the safety investigators, security staff, or MSC officials who handled the case. But the security footage confirmed the nightmare. At 9:47, passengers were there, and then they were gone. At 1:33 a.m., they reappeared in the exact same spots, seamlessly continuing what they had been doing. Even worse, every clock on Deck 7 had stopped at 9:47 and remained frozen for 4 hours. When the passengers reappeared, the clocks ticked back to life, as though nothing had happened. Experts insisted such a time anomaly was impossible with the ship's chronometers. Robert was silenced with a non-disclosure agreement and an early retirement package. He was banned from discussing the August 3rd incident with anyone. Crew, pay, passengers, or press. The official explanation blamed simultaneous malfunctions in the timekeeping and tracking systems, but Robert knew better. He left the crew's world behind and now manages events at a luxury resort in Key Largo, Florida. Still, he checks his watch every night at 9:47, unable to stop. On nights he falls asleep early, he wakes suddenly at that exact time, heart racing. In his private research, he's found other accounts. Passengers on other ships who vanished for hours only to return with no memory of being gone. The MSC Seaside still sails its Caribbean routes under a new cruise director. On Deck 7, karaoke nights, poker games, and trivia contests continue, but crew whisper about the clocks. They constantly need resynchronizing with the ship's master chronometer, as if time there refuses to behave. And yet, passengers laugh and play, never knowing they are spending their evenings in a place where time itself once stopped for 4 impossible hours. Robert Anderson still checks passenger lists every night and has grown unreasonably afraid of the time 9:47. He refuses to schedule anything past that hour, and sometimes he even calls the MSCID's guest services in the middle of the night to confirm that all passengers are accounted for. On the ship, where he once lost 4 hours of his life, an event that officials still claim never happened, time now runs normally. But Robert never feels the same. Let's move to the sixth story, Narrative 6. This one will also make you rethink the safety rules you put your trust in. Our sixth story takes us to a lifeboat drill, something meant to be the safest part of any cruise. But on the allure of the seas, a routine safety drill twisted into something no passenger wants to remember. At just 26 years old, Elena Pro had already been a safety officer for 4 years. She thought she had seen it all. Trained by the International Maritime Organization, skilled in crowd control, fluent in English, Spanish, and Russian, she could guide thousands of people through evacuations calmly. She had completed over 200 drills without a single incident, earning respect for her strict focus and ability to keep passengers under control. She served aboard the Allure of the Seas, one of the largest passenger ships ever built, a floating city carrying more than 6,000 travelers and 2,300 crew. From Fort Lauderdale, it sailed the Caribbean to Jamaica, Mexico, and Honduras. Elena's duty was to run lifeboat drills, making sure guests could reach safety in any real emergency. But nothing in her training prepared her for what she faced that November morning. It was November 12, 2020, the second day of the voyage. At 11 o'clock a.m., the ship's alarm sounded for the planned drill. Elena took her position at Muster Station 4C, leading about 500 passengers through the process. At first, everything went as usual. She gave her instructions in 3 languages, showed how to find life jackets, where to go in emergencies, and how to board the lifeboats. People listened with mixed attention, just as always. By 11:17, she moved into the hands-on part, signals, jacket practice, lining up for evacuation. But then, something shifted. Something she couldn't explain. The passengers started moving in perfect formation. Not messy, distracted groups, but a clean line, step for step, eyes fixed forward, as if following an invisible command. "This is only a drill," Elena said through her megaphone, her voice echoing down the deck. But they didn't respond. They didn't even look at her. They kept marching toward the lifeboats in eerie silence like puppets on unseen strings. Panic stirred in Elena's chest. She radioed Chief Officer Miguel Rodriguez. "I have a problem. My group is acting strange, ignoring orders." His reply was chilling. "Elena, it's happening everywhere. Every muster station. They're heading to the lifeboats. Don't let anyone board. Repeat, don't let them board." But it was too late. At her station, passengers were already reaching the massive davits, the machinery that lowers lifeboats into the sea. Elena froze as the systems came alive on their own. Metal groaned, hydraulics whined. Without a hand touching the controls, the lifeboats began to descend. The deck vibrated with the weight of steel cables straining. She slammed the emergency stop button again and again, but the machinery ignored her. The control panel glowed red with a chilling message, manual override, yet no one was at the controls. "Emergency! Stop the launch!" Elena screamed, but the lifeboats kept dropping toward the waves 60 feet below. Worse still, passengers started climbing into them, their faces blank, movements mechanical. In minutes, 4 lifeboats, each filled with about 125 people, were sliding down toward the sea. Elena's mind spun with terror. If they hit the water, the boats would detach and drift away. There would be no way to bring them back. At 11:28 a.m., her voice broke as she shouted into the PA system, "This is not a drill. All crew and passengers report to emergency stations. Lifeboats are deploying without command." The alarm blared across the ship. On the bridge, Captain James Sullivan's voice crackled over her radio, shaking with fear. "Elena, what is your status? Our systems show no lifeboats launched, yet instruments say 4 boats are already in the water. That's impossible." Elena's stomach dropped. She looked over the side, and there they were. 4 lifeboats floating on the clear Caribbean water, packed with people. The ship's systems, however, claimed the lifeboats were still locked in their davits. Both realities existed at once. "Captain, I see them. 4 lifeboats adrift, passengers aboard. We need rescue operations now." Elena shouted, binoculars pressed to her face. She saw terrified faces looking back, mouths moving in silent screams. Yet when the ship launched its helicopter to the coordinates, the pilot radioed back with confusion. "Bridge, this is the HE. Helicopter. I'm circling the area. Nothing here. No boats, no debris, no passengers. The water is clear." From the ship, Elena saw them clearly, real as day. Others on deck claimed to see the lifeboats too, while some stared at the waves and swore nothing was there at all. For 3 long hours, the horror continued. The lifeboats drifted farther into the distance, passengers waving, reaching. Some crew shouted they saw them. Others said Elena was losing her mind. Radar picked up nothing. Safety monitors displayed nothing. But Elena's eyes refused to lie. The lifeboats were there, and slowly, they were disappearing into the endless sea. The ship was diverted to Cozumel, Mexico. Passengers were quietly evacuated, while investigators combed through the safety systems. They found no mechanical faults, no records of unauthorized launches, nothing to suggest the incident ever happened. During interviews, Elena was questioned again and again about her stress levels, her mental health, her eyesight. The lead investigator's words chilled her. "What you saw doesn't match the evidence. You were under stress, likely hallucinations, reflections, sun glare." Elena tried to protest, but they silenced her with papers. On the fourth day, she was offered a deal, a generous severance, a move to shore-based consulting, full benefits, but she would have to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement. She could never speak about November 12th to the media, to other safety officers, not even to maritime agencies. To the world, nothing had happened. Elena signed. She had no choice. She left the sea forever, carrying with her the vision of lifeboats slipping silently away into waters no radar could detect. And though officials denied it, though reports buried it as hallucination, she will never forget the sound of machinery coming to life on its own and the sight of hundreds of passengers vanish, hang into the horizon as if called by something the ocean itself refused to reveal. Cruise ship horror story, David Kim and the future messages. She lost all trust in safety systems and emergency rules after the disaster. Now she works for a Miami manufacturing company as a corporate safety trainer. But deep inside, she has a terrible fear of water. She refuses to set foot on any boat or ship. The allure of the seas has added extra backup controls for lifeboat operations and stronger safety monitoring systems for its Caribbean routes. Still, crew members admit that lifeboat issues keep happening, sometimes showing strange signs of starting on their own. Safety drill rules have been changed too, with more supervision and electronic monitoring of passengers during evacuation practice. Royal Caribbean has also quietly trained its safety staff on how to handle what they secretly call strange passenger reactions during drills. Elena Petro has kept close watch on troubling changes in the cruise industry and follows maritime safety updates closely. She has noticed how many safety officers quit their jobs after endless problems with faulty equipment. Lifeboat malfunctions and chaotic drills often lead passengers to act in ways that make no sense at all. Some nights, she sits awake staring at Caribbean weather reports and ocean maps, thinking of the day she saw 500 people trapped in lifeboats that officials still claim never existed. Now let's move to the seventh story. This one will make you question reality itself. The seventh tale takes us into the Royal Princess's Communication Center, where an officer begins receiving messages from the future, warning him of disasters that haven't yet happened. After 12 years in the job, communications officer David Kim faced a moment that forced him to retire early at only 35, his health never recovering from the experience. David had been responsible for all radio traffic, satellite connections, and emergency system. Misses on the Royal Princess during its 7-day inside passage cruise from Seattle to Alaska. He was the ship's senior communications specialist, a man with years of experience handling some of the most complex communication systems at sea. His training with the Federal Communications Commission made him a master of marine technology. He was certified in emergency broadcasting, satellite operations, and maritime radio, and his ability to speak English, Korean, and Japanese helped him connect with ships from all over the world. Colleagues trusted him, not just for his skills, but because he kept communication flowing even in the most dangerous conditions. The Royal Princess, one of Princess Cruises' massive ships, carried 1,200 crew and 3,600 passengers through the breathtaking inside passage. It visited ports like Ketchikan, Skagway, and Juneau. On Deck 9, David's communications center was packed with state-of-the-art satellite gear, powerful radios, and emergency backups to make sure they never lost contact with the Coast Guard or nearby vessels. But on the night of September 18, 2021, David would hear something that shattered everything he thought he knew about time and technology. At 11:42 p.m., as the ship pushed through narrow fjords surrounded by icy mountains, a sudden storm struck. Winds howled at 45 knots, and waves rose as high as 15 feet. It was unusual for the sheltered inside passage, and it grew more violent by the minute. David kept his ears on several channels, relaying messages to the Coast Guard in Juneau and tracking other ships nearby. By 11:55 p.m., something impossible happened. All satellite contact was lost. Every main channel on his system showed total failure. His emergency equipment also went dead, displaying error codes he had never seen. Even his backup system broke down. It was as if the royal princess had been cut off from the rest of the works. LD in one sudden sweep. David reported quickly to Captain Lisa Morrison. "Bridge, we have no outside contact. Every satellite channel is gone. We're cut off entirely." The captain answered sharply. "That's not possible, David. We have backups for everything. Keep trying." But then something even worse began. As David scrambled to restore connections, his radio started picking up signals that should not have been there. Voices came through on multiple channels, carrying details that were strange and terrifying. At 12:17 a.m., a perfectly clear transmission broke through on the emergency frequency. "This is Coast Guard Station Juneau, Royal Princess. We are receiving your distress call about the engine room fire that will break out in 47 minutes. Rescue teams are on their way." David froze. There was no fire. He had sent no distress call. He reported it to the captain at once. "No fire here, Captain, but the Coast Guard just said they got a call from us. They're responding to something that hasn't happened." Captain Morrison sounded shaken. "That's impossible. Double-check every system." David did. Everything was working perfectly. No smoke, no alarms, no warnings, and yet the messages kept coming. At 12:34 a.m., another voice cut through. "This is Coast Guard Rescue Helicopter 6512, Royal Princess. We confirm seeing passengers in the water. Rescue efforts for the 43 people killed in the lifeboat accident 18 minutes ago have started." David's hands trembled as he checked his manifest. Every passenger was safe in their cabin. No lifeboats were missing. Nothing had happened. But the Coast Guard voice described a full rescue mission for an event that had never taken place. The ship was calm, but the radio world around him insisted it was chaos. Then came the most chilling call. At 1:03 a.m., a voice came through that froze his blood. It was his own voice. "David Kim, from the Communication Center, Royal Princess. I'm transmitting from a lifeboat after the ship struck an iceberg. The ship went down at 12:47 a.m. There are 340 survivors on rafts. We need immediate rescue. Please confirm." David stared at the radio, horrified. The voice was undeniably his own. His tone, his cadence, every detail, but he was sitting alive in the communication room, the ship steady under his feet. He grabbed the bridge phone. "Captain, you need to come down here now. I'm getting messages that can't be real. You need to hear them yourself." Within minutes, Captain Morrison rushed in. David replayed the transmissions. The captain listened as Coast Guard calls described disasters that never happened, and then her own officer's voice begged for help from a sinking ship. The messages were detailed, vivid, and chilling, as if the Royal Princess were living two different timelines at once. Morrison's face turned pale as David's recorded voice echoed through the room, his voice asking for rescue from the depths of the sea. Cruise ship horror story, phantom messages, and the theater incident. "This isn't possible, David. These transmissions describe disasters that never happened. But the voices, I know them. Those are Coast Guard members I've worked with for years. And that last message, there's no doubt, that was your voice. How could you possibly be receiving calls from yourself?" Captain Morrison's face had turned pale. She immediately tried to reach Coast Guard Station Juneau. When she finally got through, the reply was chilling. The station confirmed there were no emergencies in their region, no operations of any kind, and they had not received or sent any signals involving the Royal Princess. For the next 6 hours, while the storm outside battered the ship, David's radios continued to speak with impossible precision. The transmissions became more detailed, describing calamities unfolding on a version of the ship that seemed to exist in a different reality, one where every disaster struck at once. David listened to his own voice in those ghostly signals, calmly calling for rescue teams, giving technical breakdowns of failures he had never seen, and organizing passenger evacuations for events that never touched his ship. What shook him even more was the level of detail. The transmissions described emergency procedures David had never been trained in, and listed technical terms and codes he had never studied in any manual. It was as if the other David had lived through years of disasters in another timeline. The worst part was that his other self seemed to know the future. Hours before real issues appeared on the ship, like minor system errors or electrical surges, the transmissions had already warned about them, almost as if mocking him with knowledge of what would come. The final transmission came at exactly 6:23 a.m. It was his own voice again, cold and certain. "This is you, David." Starting at 6:30 a.m., the strain of hearing these messages will cause a complete mental collapse. "In 7 minutes, you will be found unconscious at your station. You will never return to sea again. Goodbye, and thank you for listening to your future." David sat frozen, staring at the radio. 7 minutes later, exactly as foretold, Captain Morrison discovered him slumped at his desk, unconscious. He was rushed to a hospital in Juneau, where doctors said his condition was due to acute psychological exhaustion. He never returned to maritime communications. An investigation followed, involving the FCC, Princess Cruises Technical Division, and several communication experts. David was excluded from reviewing any findings. Official reports concluded there had been no unusual transmissions, no signs of radio interference, and no technical failures. Every piece of equipment had been tested and found fully functional. His accounts were dismissed as stress-induced hallucinations, fueled by the violent storm and lack of sleep. There were no recordings matching the messages David swore he heard. Princess Cruise quietly offered David early retirement with full medical benefits, but only under a strict non-disclosure agreement. He was forbidden from ever speaking of the incident with federal authorities, communication specialists, or colleagues in the maritime field. He accepted and withdrew from the industry completely. He now works in Portland, Oregon, as a technical writer for a small electronics firm, but he has never recovered. He avoids radio equipment entirely, suffers chronic insomnia, and sometimes hears phantom voices through devices that aren't even turned on. Meanwhile, the Royal Princess continues its Alaskan voyages with a new communications officer. The company installed extra backup systems and added psychological support programs for crew working in the communication center. Still, during violent storms, operators sometimes whisper about strange radio signals slipping through, impossible calls, unexplained log entries, phantom emergencies. From his Portland home, David still listens to marine frequencies late at night, searching for others who have received impossible transmissions. Sometimes he finds them, officers reporting strange calls they cannot explain. And sometimes, in the darkest hours, he hears his own voice again, calling for rescue from disasters that never existed, drifting on the edge of time, trapped between the radio waves of past, present, and future. As we move into the 9th story, you'll wish you never watched another cruise ship performance. The 8th story takes us to the entertainment deck, where a show twisted into something far more disturbing. This one happened aboard the Carnival Horizon, inside its grand main theater, where actors began performing scenes they had never rehearsed. Rebecca had been an entertainment director for 6 years when, at just 28 years old, she faced something that drove her from the cruise industry forever. Rebecca was the senior entertainment coordinator during the Carnival Horizon's 7-day Southern Caribbean voyage from Miami. She oversaw every performance, variety shows, live entertainment, and theater productions. With a theater arts degree from NYU and years of staging complex productions, she was skilled in handling the demanding schedules cruise entertainment required. Her reputation stretched across the Carnival fleet, creative, organized, and capable of managing large casts from around the world. Fluent in French, Spanish, and English, she could direct singers, dancers, and crew no matter where they came from. Her calm under pressure and ability to stage Broadway-level shows in cramped ship theaters had earned her respect everywhere she worked. The Carnival Horizon, part of Carnival's Vista class, carried 1,400 crew and 3,900 passengers across the turquoise Caribbean, docking in islands like Trinidad, Grenada, Barbados, Aruba, St. Lucia, and St. Kitts. The ship's main theater, stretching across decks 3 and 4, had seating for 100 guests, advanced lighting and sound systems rivaling any land-based stage. Backstage dressing rooms and technical setups made it possible to host elaborate performances and fast-changing variety shows. On December 5, 2019, during what should have been a normal evening performance of Caribbean Dreams, Rebecca encountered something she couldn't explain. At 8:00 p.m., she settled into her lighting booth to watch the familiar 90-minute variety show unfold. She had staged the show dozens of times, a blend of songs and dances with a Caribbean theme, performed by a tight-knit cast of 8 international performers who had been rehearsing together for 6 months. The opening act, Island Paradise, went perfectly. Dancers in bright costumes filled the stage with calypso and reggae, and the audience clapped along, smiling as they always did. But at exactly 8:23 p.m., something shifted. During the transition between the third and fourth musical numbers, instead of beginning the next scheduled song, Tropical Sunrise, the performers abruptly broke script. They launched into a completely unfamiliar dramatic scene. Rebecca froze. None of this was in her program. Leading the change was Maria Rodriguez, the ship's Spanish-born vocalist, who suddenly spoke in flawless English with an accent Rebecca had never heard from her before. "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen," Maria announced with a strange smile, "you will witness something unforgettable, something that happened in this very theater 3 years ago." The cast moved into position, ignoring their choreography. Rebecca tried to call them over their wireless headsets, but none of her commands went through. It was as if her system had gone dead. She watched helplessly as her performers acted out a scene that was completely unrehearsed, yet chillingly precise. The stage became a grim recreation of a maritime disaster. Actors took on the roles of panicked passengers and frantic crew members during an evacuation. The dialogue was flawless, filled with detail and urgency, unlike anything in her carefully prepared show. The performance had become something else entirely, something darker. Rebecca's heart pounded as Maria faced the audience once more, still using that strange accent. "What you are about to see is not entertainment," she said with calm certainty. "It is memory. When the emergency evacuation system failed on December 5, 2016, 347 passengers lost their lives during a performance in a theater just like this one. Tonight, we'll show you exactly what went wrong, so you'll know what could happen if it ever happens again." Rebecca scanned through the ship's history in her notes quickly, but the Carnival Horizon wasn't even built until 2018, which was 3 years after the supposed 2016 tragedy. The ship didn't even exist at the time, so the performers' claims about a past disaster had to be false. Still, they went ahead with their unscheduled show, carrying it out with unsettling precision and skill. The 8 actors, who seemed far more trained than Rebecca had ever instructed, began performing an emergency evacuation scenario. They acted as if they were true safety specialists, guiding passengers, explaining escape routes, and showing what would happen if the systems failed. The more realistic the act became, the more uneasy the audience grew. At 8:47 p.m., the actors started performing the deaths of passengers trapped inside the theater. Rebecca realized that the Horizon's real systems would never fail the way the actors portrayed, but somehow, they knew the theater's design, exits, and safety features in exact detail, things they should not have known at all. Panicked, Rebecca shut off the lights and sound from the control booth, trying to stop the performance. Yet the actors continued, as if powered by something beyond her control, lit and amplified by invisible equipment. The crowd remained frozen, still seated, either unwilling or unable to leave. Then the show became more terrifying. The performers began calling out names of passengers in the audience, describing their cabin numbers, favorite meals, and personal details the entertainment crew could never know. Worse, they acted out the exact deaths of those passengers with disturbing accuracy. "Mrs. Jennifer Collins, cabin 6 through 247, Maria Rodriguez announced, pointing to a woman in the third row. "When you reach for the portside emergency exit, falling debris will block the path. You will be trapped between decks 3 and 4 for 7 long minutes, screaming for your husband Robert, who will already be unconscious in the lobby." Rebecca's stomach dropped. Mrs. Collins's face twisted in horror. She seemed to know it was true. She tried to rise, but it was as if something forced her to stay seated and watch her own end. For the next 43 minutes, the performers carried on, describing passengers' deaths in terrifying detail. They spoke with knowledge so precise it would take years of engineering expertise to understand. By 9:30 p.m., 90 minutes after the show had begun, the actors suddenly stopped. They calmly returned to their positions and performed the finale of Caribbean Dreams, exactly as Rebecca had choreographed, as if nothing unusual had happened. The audience applauded, smiling like they had enjoyed a normal night. But Rebecca raced backstage in shock, demanding answers from her cast. All 8 of them looked genuinely confused. Maria, in her thick Spanish accent, said, "Rebecca, what illegal performance. We did Caribbean Dreams just as planned. The audience loved it." Rebecca pulled up the recordings from the theater's cameras, desperate to prove what she had seen. But the footage showed nothing unusual, only the regular 90-minute show with no disturbing scenes, no mentions of deaths, no haunting details. Investigators from Carnival's entertainment division, safety officers, and company psychologists all reviewed it. Rebecca's mental health was questioned, her history with the cast examined, her story picked apart. Experts said she had suffered a breakdown from stress, imagining horrific events that never occurred. They claimed her fears about passenger safety had caused her brain to invent false memories. In the end, Carnival offered her early retirement, full benefits, and a transfer to a shore-based job if she signed a strict non-disclosure agreement. She wasn't allowed to mention December 5th to anyone. Rebecca reluctantly agreed. Now she works as a corporate event planner in Orlando, far from the sea. She never returned to theater again. Nightmares never left her, visions of people trapped in auditoriums, unable to escape, while she watched powerless. The Carnival Horizon still sails its Caribbean routes, now with a new entertainment director. The company has upgraded recording systems and added extra psychological support for theater staff. But whispers remain among crew members. Actors sometimes wander into forbidden areas mid-performance, and staff are quietly instructed on how to handle performance deviation situations. Rebecca follows cruise entertainment news obsessively. She finds stories of other directors who reported impossible performances and plays that seem to show disasters that never occurred. Sometimes late at night, Rebecca pulls up construction records, checking again if it was truly impossible for the Horizon to have existed in 2016, and she searches for proof of those 347 lives supposedly lost in a theater that wasn't even built. This brings us to our last tale, which takes us to Story 9, the highest authority on any vessel, the Bridge of Fortuna. Our ninth story begins with Captain Miguel Santos, who discovered his ship was not heading to the places it should have been. Miguel had been a captain for 25 years and was known for his flawless safety record. At 52, he commanded the Costa Fortuna, carrying 3,470 passengers and 1,100 crew members along the French Riviera, Italian coast, and Greek islands. He was Costa's most trusted master, skilled at navigating one of the busiest regions in the world. Before Costa, Miguel had captained luxury liners and cargo ships and earned his master mariner license from Spain. He spoke 4 languages, essential for international waters, and was admired for his sharp navigation skills. The Costa Fortuna itself was a massive Concordia-class ship with the latest navigation equipment, satellite communications, advanced radar, chart displays, and GPS systems meant to be flawless. From his bridge on Deck 10, Miguel had every tool to ensure safe passage. Yet, on morning of October 28, 2018, something happened that defied reason. At 6:15 a.m., Miguel sat reviewing the overnight logs as they approached the Italian coast. Everything should have been routine, but when he looked at the GPS display, his blood ran cold. According to the system, the Costa Fortuna wasn't in the Mediterranean at all. It was in the middle of the African desert, 200 miles south of Cairo, thousands of miles inland, on solid ground. Rodriguez, check the GPS diagnostics immediately, Miguel ordered his senior officer. It's putting us in Egypt. Rodriguez ran the diagnostics, but the results made no sense. Every system gave a different, impossible reading. Radar placed them in the Swiss Alps. Backup satellite navigation showed downtown Paris. The compass pointed to the Sahara. And yet, out the windows of the bridge, the Mediterranean coast stretched calmly, as always. Miguel stepped outside onto the bridge wing. He saw the French shoreline to the north, clear as he'd seen countless times before. The sea was calm, the weather fine. Everything looked perfectly normal. But when he returned to the bridge, his electronic chart had shifted again, now showing a detailed map of mountains, islands, and coastlines that did not exist anywhere on Earth. The sea beneath them was no longer the Mediterranean. It was something else. Look at this, Captain. Officer Rodriguez had just made an urgent call. The ship's charts were showing routes to ports that didn't exist. New Atlantica, Deep Harbor Station, and even something called Port Valencia, far below the sea. The system displayed full harbor details, pilot stations, docking maps, port authority phone numbers, everything you would expect from real places. Yet none of these names appeared on any official maritime charts. With growing dread, Miguel stared at the screens. They showed approach routes, depth readings, and docking instructions as if these ghostly ports were no different from Barcelona or Rome. But these places were marked hundreds of feet below the Mediterranean Sea. By 7:30 a.m., the impossible had taken a darker turn. Without anyone's command, the Costa Fortuna's autopilot switched on and began steering toward one of the submerged ports. Miguel fought to shut it off, desperate to regain control, but the steering refused his hands. He ordered the engines stopped, but the engine room reported they had lost control too. The propulsion was being handled by an automated system no one had activated. The Fortuna pressed forward, locked onto coordinates leading them to a harbor nearly 400 feet under the sea. Miguel tried to raise the Italian Coast Guard using emergency frequencies, but what answered chilled him worse than the ghostly charts. A calm voice greeted him, giving detailed instructions for docking at New Atlantica, speaking in a strange rhythm of Italian he barely recognized. "This is harbor control for New Atlantica, Costa Fortuna," it said clearly. "Proceed to berth 7 on level 3. Maintain course. Descent will be automated at 400 feet. Miguel froze. He checked and rechecked his equipment. Every dial confirmed he was transmitting on official Coast Guard channels. Yet instead of rescue, he was receiving docking orders that would send his ship to the bottom with every soul on board. For 3 endless hours, Miguel recorded the bizarre readings. The ship's depth sounder began to reveal scenes no man should see. Vast underwater cities, docks, and working harbors that looked alive with shipping operations deep under the sea. It defied everything Miguel knew of physics, geography, and sanity. At 10:45 a.m., he made the choice that would end his career. Captain Santos ordered the general alarm. His voice rang out across the ship, telling crew and passengers the truth. The Costa Fortuna had lost safe navigation. Emergency procedures were to begin immediately. But almost at once, Costa Cruises headquarters intervened. A direct message came through from corporate crisis management, demanding Miguel cancel the alert. They insisted everything was normal. "Our satellite tracking shows the Fortuna is on its standard course toward Civitavecchia, Captain Santos. No anomalies are present." Miguel argued back, describing the ghost ports and the autopilot's seizure of control. But corporate repeated the same cold message: cancel the alarm and continue as usual. According to them, the ship was perfectly normal. But on the bridge, Miguel watched helplessly as the ship continued its forbidden descent toward coordinates that should not exist. Then, as abruptly as it began, the nightmare ended. At exactly 2:15 p.m., just as the charts showed they were nearing the descent point into the undersea harbor, everything blinked back to normal. The ghostly cities vanished from the displays. The GPS showed their rightful place in the Mediterranean. The autopilot disengaged, and the Fortuna smoothly resumed her path towards Civitavecchia, as though nothing had ever happened. The investigation was immediate and ruthless. Italian maritime authorities, navigation experts, and Costa's own technicians tore through every piece of equipment. Nothing was wrong. Every test came back clean. They told Miguel he had suffered a breakdown, stress-induced hallucinations caused by exhaustion. The ghost ports, the radio calls, the autopilot's rebellion, they dismissed them all as his misinterpretations of normal data. Costa offered him an early retirement with full pension, but only if he signed a strict non-disclosure agreement. He was forbidden from discussing the incident with authorities, safety organizations, or other captains. Bitter but broken, Miguel signed and left. Now, in Valencia, he teaches small boat navigation to weekend sailors. Yet he still listens to the frequencies at night, his radio's tuned for strange signals. He has noticed disturbing patterns, other captains forced into early retirement after reporting navigation anomalies, others who whispered about ports that should not exist. On the Costa Fortuna, new backup systems and added psychological support for bridge officers have been installed. Crew quietly admit that in certain conditions, the charts sometimes show impossible results. They have been told how to cover it up. From his quiet harbor school, Miguel listens and waits. Sometimes, late at night, his radios crackle with voices from ships in distress, begging permission to dock in ports no map has ever shown. He writes them down, coordinates to impossible cities that may still be waiting in the depths below. These 9 stories are just a glimpse of the horrors that haunt the seas. Sailors who have witnessed the unexplainable, travelers who have stepped into the impossible, ships carrying secrets darker than the waters they cross. If you've worked on a cruise ship and experienced the unexplainable, share your story in the comments. It might appear in the next episode of Eerie Hour. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with anyone brave enough to face the truth. If these testimonies sent chills down your spine, thank you for joining me on this voyage into the unknown. Until next time, remember, the ocean hides its secrets, but Eerie Hour reveals them. Never trust calm waters. Stay alert.